This is Lesson 1, Introduction to Phylum Arthropoda. First of all, we're going to define what an arthropod is. Arthropods have segmented bodies, a tough exoskeleton, and jointed appendages. So first of all, segmented bodies. You can really see this in this scorpion's tail, about 5 or 6 segments on the tail there if you include the little stinger at the end. If you look closely, you can also tell that the body is segmented as well. So that's very, very characteristic of arthropods. They have these segmented bodies. Now, in the last unit, Zoology 2, we talked about annelids and how they were segmented worms. So their bodies were also segmented, but arthropods have segmented bodies as well, but they also have characteristics that doesn't make them annelids, that doesn't make them worms. And one of them is a tough exoskeleton. So hopefully you can see that here on the scorpion. The kind of shininess kind of gives away that this is a very tough exoskeleton. Insects are arthropods, and they have that tough exoskeleton as well. So when you crush a beetle or another insect, you sometimes hear that crunch. That's the crunching of the exoskeleton. Crustaceans like crabs and lobsters are also arthropods, and they have really, really tough exoskeletons. So having an exoskeleton is a characteristic of all arthropods. And then finally, jointed appendages is a characteristic of all arthropods, and you can see that in the legs of the scorpion here. Antennae and mouth parts also count as appendages, so you can see that they're segmented, and that's where arthropods get they're jointed, and that's where arthropods get their name. Arthro means joint and pod means foot, so it literally means jointed foot, and arthropods have jointed appendages. Let's talk a little bit more about the exoskeleton. You can see in the picture here this grasshopper has shed or molted his exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is a tough external covering, and its function is to protect and support the body. The muscles attached to the exoskeleton, so it gives support to the body, and it also protects it, especially in really tough arthropods like crustaceans. They can be pinched or even gnawed on without breaking that exoskeleton, and it really protects them. It's made from a protein and a carbohydrate called chitin, and it must be shed or molted in order for the animal to grow. So that's what happened to this grasshopper here. It needs to get bigger, and so it has to shed its smaller exoskeleton in order for it to grow. And the molting process is very complicated and complex. We're not even going to go into it, but just know that it does have to happen in order for arthropods to grow bigger. So they shed or molt several times during their lifetime. Let's talk more about the exoskeleton. So exoskeletons vary in toughness, size, and shape among arthropods. Caterpillars like this one are firm and leathery in their exoskeletons, so it's not exactly crunchy, but they still do have an exoskeleton, and it still does protect them. Crabs and lobsters are so tough and hard that they are almost impossible to crush by hand, so they have an even tougher exoskeleton than a caterpillar. And then in many terrestrial species, and terrestrial means land dwelling, the exoskeleton has a waxy covering that helps prevent the loss of water. And you can kind of see that on the beetle here. The shininess is the waxy covering that helps the insect not lose water. So let's talk about appendages now. Appendages are structures such as legs and antennae that extend from the body wall. And these are defining traits in arthropod classes. We define arthropod classes based on the number of appendages, like spiders, which is class Arachnida. They all have 8 appendages. Insects have 6 appendages or legs. So it's kind of a defining characteristic of arthropods. And the appendages come in all shapes and sizes. You can see here there's jumping appendages, there's walking appendages, there's pincing or defense appendages, and then there's grasping or catching appendages. Arthropods are very, very diverse, and so are the ways that they accomplish the 7 characteristics of survival. So in this presentation, we're going to talk very generally about the way they accomplish the 7 survival characteristics, and then as we talk about the classes, Crustacea, Insecta, and Arachnida, we'll get more specific. So for feeding, there's a wide diversity of feeding types in arthropods. There are herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detritivores. Detritivores eat decaying. Those are animals that eat decaying matter. So there's a caterpillar, which is an herbivore eating plants. There's a spider. All spiders are exclusively carnivorous, so they only eat other animals. There's a cricket. Crickets are omnivorous. They eat both plants and animals. And then here's a millipede, which is a detritivore, eats dead or decaying matter. There are also bloodsuckers, filter feeders, and parasites in the arthropod phylum. Mosquitoes, probably the best example of a bloodsucker arthropod. These are barnacles. They're an interesting type of arthropod, a crustacean, and they are filter feeders. And then this is a tick, which is closely related to a spider, and they are parasites. So those are 7 feeding types among arthropods. All arthropods have a complete digestive system with a mouth, stomach, intestines, and anus. So this is our spider here. Here's the mouth, and then the orange is the digestive system here. So here's the stomach muscle and the stomach, and then it goes through the intestines, or the gut it's called here, and out the anus. Arthropod mouth parts have evolved to eat almost any food you can imagine. Pinchers, fangs, sickle-shaped jaws, and more. So here's an insect with pincher-like mouth parts. Spiders have fangs. This is an insect with sickle-shaped jaws. So lots of diversity in arthropod mouth parts that help them eat the different types of food that they do. Respiration now. Most terrestrial arthropods breathe through a network of tracheal tubes that extend through the body. And remember, terrestrial means land-dwelling. So land-dwelling arthropods breathe using tracheal tubes. And air enters and leaves the body through spiracles. So here's the outside of the insect, and the inside, the spiracle is the little hole. And then the tracheal tubes extend through the body and deliver the air and the oxygen to the cells of the insect. Other terrestrial arthropods, such as spiders, use book lungs. The book lungs are pictured right here, and they are layers of respiratory tissue that stack like the pages of a book. And you can see it's very closely tied to the heart, so they can pick up the oxygen and deliver it to the blood, and then it gets taken through the body. Most aquatic arthropods respire through feather-like gills, and aquatic means water-dwelling. So water-dwelling arthropods use gills, and you can see this crayfish here has these feather-like gills that help take the oxygen out of the water and then deliver it to the bloodstream, and it gets delivered to the body. For circulation, all arthropods have open circulatory systems. And what this means is that the blood is not enclosed in blood vessels the entire time. We as humans have closed circulatory system. Our blood is enclosed in blood vessels the entire time. Arteries, veins, capillaries. But arthropods have an open system. So here's kind of the path of the blood. So a well-developed heart, here's the heart, pumps blood through the arteries that branch and enter the tissues. So here's the arteries that are branching and entering the tissues. The blood leaves the blood vessels. Here it is leaving the blood vessels and moves through the sinuses or cavities. So here's the sinuses. And then the blood collects in a large sinus around the heart here. And then the blood re-enters the heart and gets pumped through the body. So that's the course of an open circulatory system. For excretion, most terrestrial arthropods dispose of nitrogenous waste using Malpighian tubules. Nitrogen is also metabolic, so it's the waste that your cells produce as they perform their functions. And Malpighian tubules are sac-like organs that extract waste from the blood and then add it to the digestive waste. So here's a Malpighian tubule. You can see it's a tubule because it's shaped like a tube. So the waste comes into it from the blood, and then it drops the waste into the intestines and into the, so this is the waste of the digestive system, and then it gets pushed out the anus. Aquatic arthropods use diffusion to move cellular waste into the surrounding water. So they don't have Malpighian tubules. They use diffusion to get the waste out of their bodies. For response, all arthropods have a well-developed nervous system. All arthropods have a brain. They all have a ventral nervous cord, which means it runs along their stomach side. Ours runs along our back. And then along the nerve cord are ganglia, or groups of nerve cells. And you can see these little blue clumps here. These are ganglia. And what these ganglia do is they coordinate movements of individual legs and wings. So they help the brain out by coordinating the movement of appendages. Arthropods have sophisticated sense organs such as eyes and taste receptors. These are the eyes of a fly. These are the eyes of a spider. These are the antenna of a moth. So very sophisticated sense organs that can help them see really well and detect what's going on around them. For movement, all arthropods move using well-developed groups of muscles. So they have muscles, but the important part about the muscles is that they pull on the exoskeleton to create movement. So together, the muscles and the exoskeleton create that movement. As the muscles contract, it moves in the exoskeleton and creates this flexed movement, and as it relaxes, it lessens its grip and releases the and extends the appendage of the arthropod. Finally, reproduction. All terrestrial arthropods have internal fertilization. Here's a pair of beetles mating. Internal fertilization means that the male delivers the sperm direct into the female. So the males have a copulatory organ to deliver sperm directly into the female. Aquatic arthropods may have internal or external fertilization. It depends on the arthropod. But then this is true of all arthropods. Once fertilized, the eggs are laid, and then they develop outside the female's body. So once this female has her eggs fertilized, she'll lay them, and they'll develop into little beetles outside of her body. This is a crayfish. The eggs are developing outside of her body. So that is our introduction to phylum Arthropoda.